Welcome back to UIT Sports. Francis and Jason here debating a very interesting subject today. A lot of rumours flying around about which team is the best in Europe at the moment. For me, it only comes down to two, and we're going to talk a little bit, give you some context, and then take it into a debate. So, Bayern Munich, for me, to start off with, the other team obviously being Barcelona, or Leicester City could come in there with Jimmy Vardy leading the way. Who knows? But Bayern Munich, at the moment, Jason was throwing some facts at me a minute ago, outscoring their opponents since their loss to Arsenal, 25-3. So Bayern Munich definitely leading the way as one of the strongest teams in Europe for me at the moment. 8 points clear in Bundesliga. They've only conceded 5 goals at this point this season. Scored 37, unbeaten in Bundesliga play. Clearly dominant in the Champions League. Can you say no more? Lewandowski firing on all cylinders. Douglas Costa coming in to be one of the strongest additions, I would say, in Europe this season so far. The best signing in Europe, if you were to ask me. They are just flying at the moment. And this isn't unfamiliar territory for Bayern Munich. They start the season very strong. A lot of occasions, specifically the Champions League, they've done it, and they kind of falter off towards the end, as seen with injuries and so on. So we hope that they can stay fit. And Jason, you were talking about this before. It just seems like that. I don't know what you have to weigh up the competition as well in Bundesliga. Before we throw it over to Barcelona, the strongest competitors are Borussia Dortmund at the moment, and Dortmund are flying as well. Aubameyang, top goal scorer in Europe, banging in goals all over the place. But
what happened when Bayern played?
Exactly.
That's before they lost to Arsenal, so before the 25-3 run of form they've had. That's just goals I'm talking about. They beat Dortmund that was in Bayern, 5-1.
Yeah, they destroyed them. And that shows the difference in the competition there. Borussia Dortmund are a fantastic team. I think they're a world-class team when they're on form. But Bayern Munich just completely disregard them. But to talk about Barcelona, we have Xoel, who is a columnist for Fox Deportes and for SB Nation, focusing specifically on the Catalan of FC Barcelona. We want to get his perspective on this as we discuss this subject further. Thank you so much for joining us here, Xoel. Can you tell us a little bit about this debate and where you see Barcelona coming into this? Because as we know, Barcelona is strong at the moment, top of La Liga, won 13 games, only lost 2, scored 33 goals so far and 4 points clear. What have you seen this season from Barcelona, and why do you think they're the best team in Europe, if you do think that at the moment?
Well, I do think they're the best team in Europe. Obviously, I'm a little bit biased. But I think partly the defense has stepped up a lot more. There was a concern going on to the beginning of the season whether Gerard Piqué, who had a fabulous 2014-15 season, if he can continue this. And so far he has. And he really now is the leader of that back line. We also know Jordi Alba and Dani Alves like to go up front. So, along with Mascherano, having a strong Gerard Piqué back there is huge for Barcelona. It's always needed. There was a concern that, maybe will he dip down in form, because we saw it previous to last season, the past 2 seasons before that, he had been struggling a lot. So now that he has continued to keep his form from last season, I think that has been a huge help. They've only allowed 1 goal in the past 7 matches in all competitions. Obviously, we saw they did to Real Madrid, shutting them down. I think you go with the midfield. To overcome all these injuries, to overcome, obviously, the FIFA transfer ban, everything has been huge. And obviously, we know the midfield, we talk about Messi, Neymar, Suarez all the time, but that foundation is that midfield with Iniesta leading the charge. Ivan Rakitic hasn't had the best of seasons so far. Then again, he started off like this last season as well. Yeah. The most interesting part will be when Arda Turan comes in January to see how he fits in. I assume he will take in the Iniesta role. He will be switching with Andres. Sergio Roberto will probably be taking over when Rakitic needs rest. But we'll see what Luis Enrique does. It's always interesting. And, what could we say about MSN up front? The best trio in the world, arguably of all time. That's debatable, but definitely the greatest trio in FC Barcelona history.
As far as I'm concerned, this is the best front three we've ever seen in football. To combine 3 players with such talent who are, the bottom line is that these 3 players, when you put them into their retrospective teams in the national stage, they're the focus point of their team. Neymar, Messi, and Suarez all have huge leadership roles in their country and have had in the past with their club teams. How they're able to blend together, share the wealth, is a testament to how well Luis Enrique has helped them blend and how they've blended together. You see again at the weekend, Messi scoring in the 90-plus minutes, assisted by Neymar. Neymar scoring, Suarez scoring, assisting each other. One of the biggest testaments, I think, was against Roma. Messi and Suarez both on the score sheet. They win a penalty kick. Messi, of course, a standard penalty kick taker, passes it to Neymar. Of course, he misses. And he's probably giving him a joke in the changing room saying, I gave you a chance, mate, and you missed it. But that shows that camaraderie between them is essential. And that is why I think they're definitely the most fierce front three. I want to touch on what you said about the midfield. Very good point. Barcelona have a farming system. I told Jason about this last season. You get Xavi, who's obviously playing a restricted role last year, but he's sculpting Rakitic. He's sculpting him to be what he was. Now, when they have Abdul Taran coming back in after the ban's lifted, I can see Iniesta doing the exact same thing. They want to sculpt these players so that when they move on, they have someone coming in to fill that void. And
when it comes down to comparing Barcelona and Bayern, you can't leave out the fact that Bayern has a one leg up on the goalkeeping. And Manuel Neuer, who's been the best goalkeeper in the world for now almost 2 consecutive years. And as Joel mentioned, Piqué in that back line. And both these teams play as a unit. And when you watch them, it's really like watching a machine. I guess the German national team machine carries over to Bayern. Granted, a lot of those guys play for the German national team. But I don't. If I had to choose who the better team at the moment is, I'm still going to side with Barcelona because even without Messi, they still can play as a unit. They still find ways to score goals. They still find ways to share the ball. Whereas when Lewandowski does cool down, and I'm like, this is no knock on Bayern, I don't know where they're going to get blowout goals from. You're right. Douglas Costa's played at an amazing level since, I don't know, about
absolutely
2
right.
months ago.
Yeah.
I agree with what Jason is saying with that point of, when Lewandowski is not on his game, which is very rare. Thomas Muller is a great player, but he can't really take over a match like Neymar can do, like Suarez can do. So if Messi is off his game, you have Neymar there who could completely take over a game, and not just with the goal scoring, but with setting up the assists or just creating a goal scoring opportunity. Same thing with Suarez as well. And with Bayern, I mean, Douglas Costa, we'll see if he can do that in the Champions League, if he can do that in the quarterfinals or the semifinals, against whether it's Barcelona or against Real Madrid, PSG, whoever you want to put in there. So, I think for Barcelona, that would be a big factor if it came down to a Barca-Bayern. Douglas Costa becomes a big factor to see how the Barca defense defends him as obviously an opponent that they haven't been too familiar with, like, for example, Arjen Robben or even a Frank Ribery, who I assume eventually will come back from injury. But, will he come back the same player? He's obviously older. Robben, we'll see what happens there. So for me, I just think they could just it's 3 the hard way with FC Barcelona, because if Messi's off, then either Neymar or Suarez is going to be on. It's very unlikely that one of that all 3 of them, I should say, are going to be off their game, and they don't have to, be the man of the match and score 2 goals or 3 goals. They could be the man of the match and give you 2 assists and create all the plays that set up, whether it's Rakitic or Iniesta coming in for one of those rare goals, as we talked about, but important goals as well. So, and then the midfield, if there is a weakness with Barcelona, it comes down to, with the defense, anytime a low cross is in to Javier Mascherano on his side, it's problems. So that's a concern, obviously, with Jordi Alba and Dani Alves coming up in front. That's always an issue that could be good for a counterattack. And we'll see how Turan fits in there, because it's not, who are we to say that it's going to fit automatically? I mean, it feels like it should be a natural fit, but, maybe there's a little bit of struggle at the beginning. And, maybe Ivan Rakitic's, struggles continue for the whole season. Hopefully not, but there's still a lot of things that could go wrong. But for now, it just looks like you guys said, it's a machine.
Yeah, so obviously I'm going to split it, not just because I want to keep this conversation interesting, we could all just side with Barcelona, but because I'm looking things at the present moment. Like, I think you hit the nail on the head there. I'm not just going to focus on whether or not Bayern Munich can do this when they move forward. Can Douglas Costa perform in the quarterfinals? I can only take what I've seen at the moment, and at the moment, I would go as far as saying that Douglas Costa is the most devastating wide player in the world at the moment. His acceleration, his direct ability with the ball at his feet. Obviously, I'm taking a more conceded role. I'm not talking about wide left like Neymar playing in that forward position. He still takes it for me. But Douglas Costa, I think, was a missing piece that Bayern Munich needed. They need to keep all their players fit. Trust me, if Robin goes out, they are up with a similar problem. I know Müller can take up that wide right role, which he did against Arsenal so well and cut inside. I just think one of the biggest things that people have somewhat overlooked at Bayern Munich this season, right, one, they haven't lost in the Bundesliga in terms of the competition there. People have to look back. I know Messi, Neymar and Suarez are on form at the moment, but at the start it wasn't so fantastic as they lost to Sevilla, they lost to Celta Vigo. They're not unbeaten in La Liga play. I haven't seen them be completely tested in the Champions League. I know they're up against some tough teams in there, but I think when you look at Bayern Munich, yes, they lost to Arsenal, and I think they'll be kicking themselves for that game. They didn't play anywhere near as good as they should. But what I've seen this season from Bayern, compared to when they lost so much against Barcelona last season, I think they've strengthened their back 4, not by adding anything different, by bringing back Javi Martinez, to fitness, getting rid of Dante, who I thought was definitely a liability at the back there alongside Boateng, and Alaba staying fit at left back. When they have that back four of Alaba, Martinez, Boateng, and Philip Lahm, even though he plays that defensive midfield role sometimes, I think they're very strong, and I think they're going to be hard to break down. I think it's just going to be, I tweeted out early on, Xoel, I said that we should just call it quits and put Bayern Munich and Barcelona in the final right now and see the game that everyone wants to see, because at the moment they're flying so high. Both of them are flying high. But I can only look at form right now. On paper, I still think Barcelona are the best team. When they're fully flying towards the end of the season, we'll maybe have this debate again and see whether or not they are. I'm looking at in form right now. And for me, the numbers state that Bayern Munich, in terms of their competition, in terms of what they've played against, for me, are the best team in the world. It was great to discuss this. This is something that we don't just want to take at face value. We want to have these different debates right there. Joel, you made a great point to not only just go along with Barcelona and the fanboys that do go along and think they're unbeatable. You mentioned a weakness in there, and I think that is a weakness. When Mascherano comes in at the back, I think he's one of the best centre-backs when he's on form. It's that pairing. When Piqué and Mascherano together, when they play consistently, they're very good. What do you think happens when Mascherano isn't in there? Do you see them as strong with Mathieu in there? Do you think they lack something?
Definitely. I think Luis Enrique is looking at Thomas Vermaelen more than, unfortunately, than Marc Bartra. I say unfortunately because I feel like Marc Bartra deserves his time to be more in the starting 11, given he technically plays Gerard Piqué's position, but he's paired up with Piqué in the past. But he's looking more at Thomas Vermaelen. We've seen him play a few matches in these last few 7 games when he's come back from his injury to see if he can be, that replacement, quote unquote, when Masche is either injured or suspended at times, because it's going to be important. Piqué, as I mentioned, if he has an off game, and we've seen Piqué, he hasn't been perfect this season. Yeah. He's had his moments where he slipped up. Figuratively, literally, he has slipped up. And so for that, and Masche, we all love Masche, but obviously his height is something he can't fight against, but it's a disadvantage. He's not the fastest, as we've seen also as well. Mathieu is technically faster, but Mathieu, in my opinion, is a terrible center back. He's just stick as a backup left back. Yeah. So for me, it's either Bartra or Vermaelen. If you want, obviously, your youth, you go with Bartra.
And one last point before we wrap up is what I wanted to mention before I mentioned it, Ban. Who did I forget to mention, Jason, throughout? And there's a reason I forgot to mention him. Arturo Vidal. Because he hasn't had that immediate impact that many people have thought. He works box to box and he's a good player. So I think, even more so, when he finds his form at Bayern Munich and finds that position that he needs to play, that's when I think they move on to that next level. And that's when I think we can talk about this even more. But Joel, thank you so much for joining us. You can check out his work over at Fox Deportes and at SB Nation. Great stuff over there. It's been great to have you on. We'll have this discussion again in the future. Maybe, fingers crossed, they don't meet in the Champions League and they meet in the final. They don't meet in the next later stages, so we're hoping that will happen. But thanks again for coming back on. Subscribe to TYT Sports. Check us out on Twitter at TYT Sports, at Francis_Maxwell, at JasonRuby91. Where can we find you on Twitter, Joel?
At Xoel Cardenas, Xoel Cardenas. Thank
Thank you so much. Come back again, guys.